Hello, I'm Thought Slime, and today we're going to talk about whether or not Batman is an authoritarian for some reason. This is what I've chosen to do with my fleeting time upon this earth. The whole world is in chaos. Children being put in cages. Let me log into YouTube, see what my favorite leftist YouTuber is doing. Oh, he's mad that people made fun of his favorite cartoon. Batman is a furry superhero created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. He fights crime in the city of Gotham with the use of his powerful nipples and magic belt. He dresses like a bat because his parents got murdered. I made a recent comment in a video saying this: but anarchists don't oppose order or rules or the Batman. Now I thought that was just a cute little joke that I could say, the type of thing I like to do in my videos in place of putting in arguments with substance. But people did not like it. Suddenly, my comments were flooded with people telling me that Batman is an authoritarian fascist, as though this was a new and novel reading of the character and not the preferred interpretation of lazy hacks since the 1980s. And I thought, that's weird. There's hundreds of interpretations of the character. Sometimes he hates guns. Sometimes he loves guns. Sometimes he'll use a gun, but only to kill a vampire. Sometimes he is a vampire. I mean, don't get me wrong, you definitely could write a story where Batman is an authoritarian fascist, and lots of people have, but does that mean that the character is irreducibly and irrevocably fascist? Now here's the part where I imagine lots of you are shouting at the screen. Yes, you fool, of course he is. He uses violence to enforce his will on other people. But does he? I mean, you're not really enforcing your will on someone if you stop them from mugging somebody. And sure, he uses violence, but so too does every political framework in existence. That alone does not qualify him to be an authoritarian. But most versions of the character also show him going to absurd, superhuman lengths to avoid doing any more violence than is absolutely necessary. He certainly doesn't usually kill his enemies, even when he would be clearly justified in doing so. In fact, most versions of the character make it explicit that he refuses to ever kill anyone ever because he so values human life. In Kingdom's Cummies, one of DC Comics' most popular stories, yeah, I know it's not canon, come at me, nerds! Superman says this of Batman: more than anyone in the world, when you scratch everything else away from Batman, you're left with someone who doesn't want to see anyone die. And he'd know. He's Batman's boyfriend, not Robin. Robin is his son. That's weird. Superman is Batman's boyfriend. Get it right. Valuing all human life is not the type of quality I would expect from an authoritarian, and I think it certainly disqualifies him from being a fascist. Fascists tend to be pretty cavalier about who gets to live and who gets to die. That's kind of their whole deal. For the record, he's also not particularly nationalist or xenophobic, so Batman's not fash. That's silly. That's silly sauce. Okay, Thought Slime, you handsome genius. He's still a billionaire playboy who dresses in high-tech ninja gear to personally punch mentally ill people. He could use his vast fortune to get to the roots of Gotham's social problems, which is probably why, in most versions of the character, he did that. He did that thing that I just said. He starts a big charity called the Wayne Foundation, and he uses his personal fortune to try and reform Gotham non-violently. It's just that the comics don't tend to focus on it, because if it succeeds, then it makes everything else in the story pointless. And also, it's really boring, and no one cares. Also, the people Batman punches aren't just mentally ill people. Mentally ill people don't typically try to poison all of the fish in a water supply to turn us all into clowns. They don't typically set bombs throughout the city that will explode if you don't answer their riddles. They don't typically try to freeze the earth. And if any of them are about to do any of those things, then maybe punching them would be a good idea. Maybe that would be a good course of action to take. It's worth noting that most of the more popular interpretations of the character have him showing sympathy for his villains. like in this touching scene from Justice League Unlimited, where he comforts a dying child, who's also a supervillain with the power to warp reality.
I got cheated out of my childhood.
I know what that's like.
You do, don't you? I'm dying very soon.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Would you stay with me? I'm scared.
Okay, but he's still a billionaire playboy capitalist. You can't deny that. I can't, but he was born into wealth, and he uses his wealth in service of an enormous social welfare program that he calls Batman. And he saves the Earth sometimes, so pretty good return on investment so far. In fact, he's openly contemptuous of the wealthy elite in Gotham, and he personally steals from a major corporation in order to funnel that money into making the community a safer place for everyone. Okay, but he works with cops. I thought you lefties were supposed to hate cops, Mr. Anarchist Man, with your hating cops. I thought blue lives didn't matter, Mr. Anarchist Man. Yeah, he does, and that sucks. He works in tandem with the police sometimes. I don't like the police, but if your standard for authoritarianism is working alongside the police even when you personally make sure that they don't abuse their power, that makes a lot of people pretty authoritarian. Every politician, every judge, every lawyer, every social worker. Here's the question. What do you think he should do instead? Do you think he should abolish the police and set up his own law? Would that be less authoritarian? Or should he lead the people of Gotham in a revolution against the police? Because, they don't seem down with that. They mostly seem concerned with making sure they don't get blown up by missile penguins. Okay, but all superhero stories are inherently authoritarian. It's one person with supreme power, using that power to boss everyone around. The idea that you can rely on one person to fix all of society's problems is inherently authoritarian. But in most mainstream American superhero stories, the heroes don't fix everything. They show up where they can, and they try to help, but that's about it. And almost all of them limit the use of their powers to helping other people, not, just doing whatever the heck they want. That's kind of their whole thing. Now, you could make an argument that that's how authoritarianism sells itself, that it has to maintain the pretense that it's in the best interest of everyone, or else other people would rise up and revolt against it. I don't really see how that has any relevance, unless you're trying to imply that everyone who works in the comics industry has some sort of ulterior authoritarian agenda, which is kind of a whack thing to suggest, and I'm not really going to dignify with a response, because it's whack. In most superhero stories, the heroes aren't overwhelmingly powerful in the context of the world they live in. In fact, they're usually outmatched by more powerful villains, Batman more so than most. If he was just punching muggers, you might have a point. Batman is an overwhelming force against muggers and goons. But he's usually fighting ninjas, or crocodile men, or evil genius luchadors. Holy shit, comics are amazing. The dude spends half of his time in elaborate death traps designed to kill him personally. He doesn't have overwhelming power. He's a regular guy that's very good at punching and has a cool silhouette. He can fight lots of people at once, but he can't single-handedly depose the government. People don't like superhero stories because they secretly long for authoritarian control. That hot take is premised on the idea that when you read a superhero comic, you're thinking to yourself, boy, I wish Batman were real so that he could get out there and purge the unworthy. Which people don't do. They read it and think, oh, it would be cool to be Batman. I wish I was Batman. Is that juvenile? Absolutely. Is it authoritarian? Why do you think superhero stories are so popular, while stories about people using extraordinary abilities for their own personal gain usually aren't? I really can't think of a single story about a person using superpowers for their own benefit that isn't like a horror story or a morality fable about the dangers of selfishness. Typically, stories like that are not fantasies to project yourself into, as superhero stories are, as you'd expect them to be if people just wanted lots of power to boss other people around. I actually think it says something pretty good about people that we fantasize about having power so that we can use it to help others. And yeah, Nazis talked about heroes a lot. Everybody's got to become a heroic individual. You know what other cultures wrote about heroes a lot? All of them. Now, mind you, Nazis did like to draw big, muscly men in heroic poses, kind of like superheroes. Pretty damning stuff. It's not like the superhero genre was invented and largely the result of the work of Jewish Americans. Oh, wait. Yes, it was. Now, I'm sure you can find specific instances which confirm or contradict everything I've just said. The thing is, there is no definitive Batman. Batman is what we like to call a plastic character, like Dr. Man from Doctor Who, or Sherlock Holmes from the works of William Shakespeare. The broad strokes remain intact. He always dresses like a bat. He's usually a good guy. His parents are always dead. But beyond that, writers are given carte blanche to decide his personality. Some writers like to delve deep into his pain and anguish. Others like to make him a globe-trotting swashbuckler. Others still like to make him a clumsy allegory for the war on terror that attempts to excuse the war crimes of the Bush administration. Comic book fans like me love to obsess over continuity, and that can be a lot of fun, but it doesn't give you a very coherent view of Batman as a character. There is no definitive Batman because he's always changing depending on who's writing him. So, why am I even talking about this? Well, I'm gonna level with you. I don't actually care if you think Batman's an authoritarian. You can stop writing that novel in the comments section. I will not read it. You're right, he is. But he's also not, because there's no definitive version of the character. He's just however you interpret him to be. I wanted to talk about this for a few reasons. A couple small ones and one big one. Small reason number one. Maybe don't give that to authoritarians. Maybe don't make them feel cool by comparing them to Batman, the coolest guy. Number two, authoritarian Batman is boring. It's boring. It's been done. I'm sick of it. It's not interesting to me anymore. Stop writing him this way. It sucks. Here comes the big one, the reason I actually care about this subject. We on the left have a bit of a reputation as joyless buzzkills, and I can kind of see why. People just want to watch cartoons sometimes, and then some lefto egghead will come along and go, actually, you're interpreting this wrong. You're supposed to look at it the opposite way that you did. You know that thing you like? It's problematic. Not in any way that, degrades people, just in like a weird way that you have to imagine into the text. Either you accept the way that I'm looking at this, or you're enjoying it wrong, and that means you're my enemy. You know what that kind of reminds me of? Gamergate, because the purpose is the same, to gatekeep people. In this case, instead of gatekeeping people for being women, you're gatekeeping them for being low art peasants who don't have the brains to interpret art on the same level that you do. How do you know they can't interpret it on the same level that you do? Well, they have to, because they disagree with me, and I can't be wrong. A better method might be to compare the things that you like to the things that people already like. Here's an example of how I would do that with Batman. I think the black bloc is a necessary tactic sometimes. If I wanted to convince someone of that, I might point out that they wear all black and wear masks to conceal their identities and intimidate their opponents. Like Batman does. If I wanted to convince someone it's okay to expropriate money from a large corporation and use that towards a social welfare program, I might point out that that's what Batman does. You can use people's passions and interests as a way to bring them into your community rather than forcing them to adopt yours. And I think that might be more helpful than smugly telling people, actually, the cartoon you like is authoritarian and you're authoritarian for liking it wrong. You must change the way you like this cartoon. That is part of the price I demand for having the privilege of agreeing with me. I can't pretend like the authoritarian interpretation of Batman is wrong. It's not. Obviously, there's a case to be made for it. I said all of the things that you could use to make that case earlier, and then cited counterexamples that may or may not satisfy you. My whole point is that, like all art, no matter how childish, it lends itself to multiple interpretations. To argue that there's one particular interpretation that's more correct than the rest is, I think, a pretty lazy way to look at art and culture. You can't solve art like a puzzle. You certainly can't solve a continuum of art created by thousands of artists over almost 100 years like a puzzle. There's a million Batmans for every kind of taste. You want a Batman who's Santa Claus? Done. You want a Batman who's a noir detective? Done. You want a Batman who's not drawn very well? Done. Here's a version of Batman that I like. It's from Neil Gaiman and Andy Kubert's underrated Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. And here's a little Batman trivia for you. When they talk about the Caped Crusader, it's Batman. That's who they're talking about. Don't say I never taught you nothing. The story takes place in some sort of metaphysical realm which may or may not be the afterlife. Various Batman characters have gathered together for Batman's funeral, and each one gives a eulogy. And in each eulogy, Batman's a little bit different, and the world he lived in is a little bit different. Gradually, it's implied that all of these Batman are one consciousness, reincarnating over and over into various different versions of the same life. The scene that stands out to me is this. In Clayface's eulogy, he tells the story of Batman dying to save him. We're not told how Batman dies or what he's doing. That's not important to the story. Before Batman dies, Clayface tells him, "I'm not worth it." To which Batman replies, "Everyone is worth it. Everyone is worth protecting. Everyone is worth saving. Everyone is worth dying for." Because that's what it means to be a hero. Not having big muscles or armored nipples. It's protecting people. It's helping people. It's giving to people. I want people to help each other. I want people to protect one another, to look out for one another. If you don't think it's possible to extract a positive message from that, maybe you're the one who's not reading into the character deeply enough. The following people gave me money on Patreon this June, without knowing I'd use it to talk about comic books today. Mad Ups to Pregnant Seinfeld, Mike Yocom, Ree Carter, Illusia S, Matthew, Ryan William Cox, Nina Lego, Spider Facts, Live Static, Cat Arthur, Matt Freeze, ironic, Brett Dibble, Nestor Ivanovich, Jacob A. Berkowitz, Julian Colin, Neil Zabildgard, Ian Thompson, Some Random Leftist, Michael Hollenbach, Matt Brighton, Mia Nakano, Leo, Jane, Nicole Vianarkaduck, Thorne Melcher, and Chorham. But the greatest of all ups goes to Queen Maxine, Chuds McKenzie, Jordan Hoxie, Shaban O'Leary, Jan Anders Bremer, Aaron B., Colbeen Monty, Dash of Week, Morgan Clark, and James Taylor. I am not a billionaire vigilante, so if you'd like to give me money, you can do that at patreon.com/thoughtslime. Press the like button and subscribe to this channel, where I make weirdo leftist nonsense. Same slime channel, often very different slime times, but I try to do 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays if I can help it, but sometimes it's too hard.